is. Third, instinctual life. The fact that the human mind, just like that of any other species, is underpinned by basic drives arising from our evolutionary history, from our embodied biological existence. This too, in Victorian times, when Freud was saying, well, we're just animals after all, was scandalous. But that, again, has been, there's not a single behavioral neuroscientist worth his or her salt who wouldn't agree that there are basic instincts. And we know a lot more about them now than we did then. Lastly, my particular personal favorite is Freud's dream theory. Freudian dream theory, we must remember, was foundational to the whole of Freudian theory. Freud first articulated a theory of how the mind works in chapter 7 of his famous book, The Interpretation of Dreams. And all of his later theory building in what came to be known as metapsychology, the general theory of the mind, all of that was founded on a theory of dreams. So I think it's of pivotal importance that recent neuroscience, by which I mean over the last decade, has Freud's basic insights into how the dreaming mind works have been absolutely vindicated. I mean, I think astonishingly so.
You've done research in this area with patients suffering from brain damage. Describe that for me.
Well, my research started with what really is the basics of any kind of neuropsychological research, which is to take a mental function, in this case dreams, and then have a look at how that function is altered, how it's affected by damage to different parts of the brain. That's how we came to understand brain mechanisms of language, of visual perception, of voluntary action, and my aim was to do the same thing with dreams. The funny thing is that it came rather late in the day, because you might have thought, when I started doing that research, which was in the 1990s, you might have thought, but we already knew the brain mechanisms of dreaming then. Whereas in fact what we knew about was the brain mechanisms of REM sleep. REM sleep had been correlated with dreaming, and very highly correlated with dreaming, so we made the basic methodological error. When I say we, I mean sleep science made the basic methodological error of assuming that correlation is causation. Because two things happen together doesn't mean that they're the same thing, or doesn't mean that the one thing causes the other. They might just co-occur. And that's what turned out to be the case with REM sleep. So my own research was an attempt to clarify what are the brain mechanisms of dreaming as opposed to the brain mechanisms of REM sleep, because they started from a chance discovery of my own, that when you damage the part of the brain which generates REM sleep, in humans and in all other mammals, dreaming continues. And my predecessors who'd done research in this area had worked with mainly cats and rodents, who of course have the same sleep physiology as us, but you can't ask them about their dreams. Mm-hmm. So what was necessary was to look at human equivalents, at human patients with damage to the same parts of the brain as had been experimentally damaged in those other animals, and ask them about their dreams. The surprise was to find that dreaming continues despite loss of REM sleep. And that then paved the way for what I just said, my main research in this area, which was looking at what the effects on dreaming are, as opposed to the effects of REM sleep, of damage to different parts of the brain. That in turn led to a very interesting discovery, which is that there's another part of the brain, not the part that generates REM sleep. There's another higher part of the brain which generates dreams. When you have damage to, it's called the mesocortical or mesolimbic dopamine system. It's also known as the reward system or the seeking system. Some people call it the wanting system. It's a sort of basic positive emotional desire mechanism.
This is the higher order that,
this is the higher order
dictates to the REM sleep area.
That's right. Damage to that system leads to a cessation of dreaming and preservation. So REM sleep is preserved, but dreaming is lost. Conversely, with damage to the REM sleep centers, REM sleep is lost, but dreaming is preserved. So there really are two completely dissociable functions, dreaming and REM sleep. They happen together, but they're not the same thing. It's like babies cry when they're hungry. So, they're highly correlated with each other. But you would be making a big mistake if you look for the mechanism of crying in the digestive tract. Mm-hmm. And that's the mistake we made in sleep science.
What do you believe to be scientifically true about psychoanalysis, but where proof is lacking and maybe on the horizon?
I believe that the fundamentals of psychoanalytic theory are consistent with the general picture that's emerging from cognitive and affective neuroscience, namely that the mind consists of two sort of provinces, one of which is dictated to by the demands, the vital needs of the organism, what Freud called the id, the drives, the instincts, emanating from this part of the mind is our basic motivational and emotional life, and that this is constrained by, inhibited by, regulated by an externally directed part of the mind, which Freud called the ego, which receives information from the outside world, analyzes that information, stores it, builds up an internal model of how the world works, which is necessarily individualized. It's how your world works. And then the interaction between these two things, between what Freud called id and ego, what we might call brainstem and limbic system on the one hand, and thalamocortical mechanisms on the other, that the dynamic interaction between these two things, the business of it is, how do I meet my needs in the world that I find myself in? That's how the mind works. That's what Freud inferred from psychological data, and the rest is detail. That imbalances of a multiplicity of types between these two poles of the mind lead to emotional and behavioral disorder. Is another truism. This is, all of the evidence points in that direction, and as I say, the rest is